Guru R. Ananthamurthy addressed IIM Bangalore at its 40th anniversary last October. He gave a long, inspirational speech to all those budding management students. Here it is for you.
A hall full of people who have come to listen to me and who also frightened me a little. I have been introduced with such warmth by your director, and I must say that one of the teachers here, Sriram, is very dear to me as a Kannada writer, and I said something silly about Indian Institute of Management when it came to politics, and he rebuked me in one of the articles, and I have accepted his rebuke because I corrected myself. Because, we think of institutions in a very essentialist way and then make comments sometimes. And then when you look at it closely, then you know that you are wrong and you have to set it right. I'm always prepared to set it right. And today I have taken a very important topic for me, and I have talked about it on several occasions. But every occasion I have talked about it, I have changed it a little. There are so many variations of what I have spoken. I am going to speak about what I call three hungers of our times. I call them hungers. I have used that word from a great French philosopher. I call them hunger because the first hunger is hunger for equality. For nearly 100 years, if you say that what has moved the most spiritual of people, not political, spiritual, it is hunger for equality. Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, the South African president who is ailing, or the Burma leader, take anyone. It is hunger for equality. And if you ask me, which is the most moving prayer in the world, we shall overcome. It's a very moving. Even today, if I hear that, my eyes are full of tears. Not when you do bhajan. I am not moved, but I am moved by this. Because I think the most spiritual aspiration of man has been the aspiration for equality. What was the great concern in the past, which was also a great concern, in the Vedic times, for instance? Arhata. Everywhere you talk about who is arha, who is the fit to get this education. Arhata. Sometimes it degenerates into only a Brahmin can get this education. It's a degeneration of the concept of arhata. It should not have been better. You also have an arhata test. You don't have caste criteria, and sometimes you are also accused of caste criteria, by democratic institutions, that you take only the elitist. But there has always been a concern with arhata in the past and also in the globalizing present. Arhata, who is fit to do this. That has produced great systems, arhata. And it has also been not a fixed idea, it goes on changing. You are also challenged to change your concept of arhata. Why? Because the great passion is for equality in the world. It moves the blacks, the homosexuals, the odd people, everyone, the desire for equality. And what is the other? I am going to expand all these. I may even come back to these. That's why I am standing, because I remember I am a teacher if I stand. So I can do that. And if you have made a record of it, I can write it and then give it to you later on. as a kind of an essay for you. What is the second great hunger? I call it the hunger for modernity. All old traditions, the young in these old traditions are attracted by what I call modernity. Modernity is different from modern world system. I'm not speaking of modern world system. I am speaking of modernity as a state of mind. Who was the first one to be attracted to modernity in India? Gandhi. He wanted to go abroad. And there was a rule that you can't go abroad. He gave an undertaking that he will not eat meat, that he will not do certain things to his mother, and he wrote it down and went and kept a diary that whether he has done it or not, and then produced it. Even then, his community put him out. But modernity was a passion. It was a passion for Gokhale. It was a passion for the great Bengali Renaissance figures. So along with the passion for modernity came a passion for English language. It came along with that because that was an instrument through which modernity could be achieved. But when English is used for superstition, it is no longer by the godmen. There are quite a few godmen who use English for spreading superstition. It is a different use. But the first use was Raja Raman Roy and others who could prove that they wrote English as well as an Englishman. Here is an instance which I used as a teacher. There is a passage that Raja Raman Roy wrote to the governor of Bengal. Once he was coming on a horse-driven cart with a driver, and there was some European English young man standing on the gate, near the gate of a house, and the cart driver did not salute him. And so he got angry, came and pulled the cart, pulled down the driver and hit him, and went away. Raja Raman Roy wrote a letter to the governor. I always use this letter because this letter is in a kind of English which Goldsmith used. Long sentences. A page would have one sentence. And then you had to read it so carefully. You should know what is the noun clause, what is the adjectival clause, what is the adverbial clause, where it ends, where it takes. You know, that was an English which my father also admired. It was like Sanskrit, almost. A long sentence like Bana's Kadambari. So he writes a letter like that so that the governor will have to read it twice before he understood it. So in a way, like later on the West Indians did, they played cricket better than the Englishmen. Here we played the English language better than an Englishman. So we used English, to show them, we can do it better. But before that, Raja Raman Roy used Persian, for his communications. So modernity was the second largest passion. And a lot of English literature was read by great writers. As a matter of fact, English literature was not read very widely in England. And the British realized if they sent somebody to rule India, Indians are so culture-bound that if they didn't know their literature, they would not respect them. And hence, English literature was taught in colleges. The first syllabus for English literature came as a result of training people to rule India. Chaucer to Tennyson. So they had to know, so that an Indian would admire them. Here we have a postmaster, but he's a well-read man. Well-read man means he knows Shakespeare. So that kind of a thing. So literature became a very important thing so that they can govern India. So these are all gifts of modernity. So that is the second hunger. The third hunger, about which I am going to speak at length later on, is a spiritual hunger. In the sense, if you are a Hindu, a devout Hindu, you go to temple, you do all the pujas. And if you are a Muslim, you do all the prayers, and the Christians do all the prayers. But then comes, because of science and technology, a doubt whether God does really exist, whether he took 7 days to create the world. Did he also take rest on Sunday? And did they create Adam first and then Eve? Is that true? For in 19th century, Matthew Arnold said it is not true, but it is symbolic. And later on somebody said if you read them as symbols, you can't read it as a religious text. So there was a big quarrel between those who wanted to take it literally, those who wanted to read it metaphorically. Matthew Arnold said if you read it metaphorically, it will survive. If you read it literally, it will not survive. And hence religions have had a problem. And hence people who have a hunger for God turn to spirituality. Without religion, without a prophet, a direct relation between me and God. One of the great examples for that for me was Jiddu Krishnamurti. I used to listen to him. I had differences with him, but I could see here was really an attempt to go beyond religions and establish a certain relationship with whatever is the highest. Now if you ask me, all these three hungers are connected. Connected with what? Connected with the hunger for equality. Even the religious hunger for spirituality is connected with this. Because you don't want a pope, you don't want a priest, you don't want somebody higher than you. You want to have a direct contact. And modernity, why? Because you want to belong to the world of knowledge as an equal. Modernity. So behind all these three there is this hunger for equality. And hence, I come back to a very important statement by a French philosopher who have influenced me a great deal. There was a statement in the 19th century to develop criticism of anything, you have to first criticize religion. If you don't develop a critique of religion, you can't have a original thought. Because those who believe in religion think that all questions are settled once and forever in religion. So if you go to the Vedas or the Quran or the Bible, you will get an answer for every question in the world. And hence, where is the room for original thought? And hence, Marx said, to develop criticism, you have to critique religion. In our century, do you know what? It has changed. To develop new thought, you have to develop critique of technology and science. And technology and science are supposed to solve all problems of the world. When you talk about the earth becoming impossible to live on, then there must be some answer in technology. That's what we believe. That's why we don't mind doing any terrible thing on this earth, because we think that there is technology somewhere in our mind which will correct it. I've seen it with regard to religion also. Quite a few of us young people say, there is no God, etc.